Today, we're going all the way back to the beginning. We're talking about a 9-page document that dropped in 2008 from a totally mysterious creator. And this one little white paper, well, it didn't just invent a new currency. Nope, it proposed a whole new way to think about trust, money, and power. So let's break it all down.
Right there. That one sentence from the paper's abstract, that's the whole mission in a nutshell. You see, the goal wasn't just to make digital money. The real goal was to completely reinvent how transactions work, to move us away from a system where you have to trust big institutions to one where you can just trust math, verifiable cryptographic proof.
But that raises a huge question, right? This was the problem that stumped people for decades, the infamous double spending problem. I mean, think about it. Any digital file, whether it's a photo or a song, can be copied a million times. So how in the world do you make a digital dollar that can only be spent once without a bank in the middle watching everything? So yeah, the trust problem. To really get why Bitcoin's solution was so brilliant, you first have to understand the problem it was built to solve. Before 2008, every single online payment you ever made, from buying a book to wiring money, it all had to go through a trusted middleman, like a bank.
And this comparison really gets to the heart of it. The old system is built on trust, but, that trust has a price. Transactions can be reversed, which is a headache for sellers, and all those middlemen, they add costs and complexity. Satoshi's idea was the complete opposite. A system where once a payment is sent, it's final. Where fraud is basically impossible from a computational standpoint, and where you can send money directly from one person to another.
All right, Satoshi's radical idea. So who is the genius who came up with this proposal? Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows. The paper was published under the name Satoshi Nakamoto, but that's a pseudonym. To this day, we have no idea who he, she, or they are. And what's wild is how fast this anonymous idea blew up and became a real thing.
I mean, the speed was just incredible. In August of 2008, someone registers the domain. Just 2 months later, boom, the white paper drops. And by January of 2009, the network is actually live. The first block, the Genesis block, is mined. Then, just as mysteriously as they arrived, Satoshi was gone by 2010, leaving the entire project to the community.
The title of the paper is really the best definition you can get. Peer-to-peer simply means person-to-person, no bank in the middle. Electronic cash means it works like cash in your hand. Once you give it to someone, the transaction is done. And system, well, that's the whole amazing network that makes it all work.
So how did Satoshi actually solve that double spending problem without a bank? The answer was this incredibly clever invention called the blockchain. This is really the engine under the hood of Bitcoin, and it's the elegant solution to that age-old problem of trust. So at its core, you can think of the blockchain as just a giant shared accounting book. It's decentralized because everyone on the network has their own copy, so no one person is in charge. It's public, meaning anyone can look at it. And it's a ledger, which is just a fancy word for a permanent record of who paid what to whom. It's all out in the open. So what actually keeps this public book secure? Well, that's the chain part of blockchain. See, every new batch or block of transactions gets its own unique digital fingerprint, called a hash. Then that new fingerprint gets embedded into the next block, which links them together in a chain. It means that if you wanted to go back and change an old transaction, you'd have to redo the fingerprint for every single block that came after it. It's designed to be an incredibly secure, tamper-proof history of everything that's ever happened. Okay, so you might be wondering, who gets to add new pages to this shared book? This is where something called proof of work comes in. It's basically a competition. People on the network, who we call miners, use their computers to solve a really, really hard math puzzle. And the first one to solve it gets the right to add the next block of transactions to the chain.
And Satoshi's own words explain this perfectly. One CPU, one vote. In this kind of system, your say isn't based on who you are. It's based on how much computing power you contribute to the network. The correct version of the ledger, the truth, is always the longest chain, the one that has the most computational work, the most votes invested in it.
All right, so that's the theory. We've covered the big ideas, but now let's walk through what actually happens step by step when you send a Bitcoin transaction from point A to point B.
So here's how it all goes down. When you send a payment, your transaction gets broadcast out to everyone on the network. The miners scoop it up, bundle it into a new block, and start that race to solve the proof of work puzzle. The winner then shouts out, "Hey, I solved it! Here's the new block," and shares it with everyone. All the other nodes check their work, and if it's all good, they add that block to their copy of the chain.
And just like that, the longest chain grows, becoming the one true record for everybody.
So Bitcoin's legacy, that little 9-page paper did a whole lot more than just launch a new kind of money. It kicked off this massive global conversation about money, about trust, about decentralization, and that conversation is still raging today.
Now, this number right here, this might be the most radical feature of the whole system. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. Unlike the money we're used to, its supply is totally fixed and predictable. It's written right into the code. And this idea of provable digital scarcity, well, that's why you hear so many people call it digital gold.
And it's really important to understand that this technology didn't just appear out of nowhere. Bitcoin has some pretty deep philosophical roots. It was inspired by economic ideas that argue for taking money out of the hands of governments and central banks, and by a whole movement of cryptographers and privacy advocates called the cypherpunks.
So what do the experts think today? Well, they don't agree at all. You've got people like the head of the Fed, Jerome Powell, who kind of sees it as a speculative digital gold. Then you have a Nobel Prize-winning economist calling it a pure bubble. Some folks at the Fed think it's actually a healthy threat that keeps banks honest, and others just see it as cash for the underground economy. The jury is definitely still out on this one. And you can see this global debate playing out in how countries are dealing with it. You've got a couple of nations like El Salvador that have made it legal tender, but then you have others that have banned it completely. Most countries, though, are somewhere in the middle, kind of taking a wait-and-see approach.
But here's the bottom line. No matter what you think of Bitcoin as an investment, its biggest legacy might be the technology it unleashed. The blockchain gave us a totally new blueprint for building systems that don't need a central party you have to trust. And that idea has inspired thousands of new projects, way beyond just finance.
Which brings us right back to the central question. After more than a decade, the debate is hotter than ever. The technology solved that double spending problem, but in doing so, it created this new thing that nobody can quite agree on what it is. Is it digital gold? A threat to the system? A bubble? The answer to what Bitcoin truly is, well, that story is probably still being written.